Hey there again, John here, and in this video we're going to take everything that we've learned and we're going to bring it together to create a kick-ass website, or at least I think it's a kick-ass website, because we're going to create the website that you're looking at, which is a mock-up of the howtomake-my-website.com website. So I'm actually going to show you pretty much how I created my own website. So this is pretty much the flagship video. It's going to draw on everything that you've learned up to this point, and we're going to bring everything together. So I think it'll be really good learning experience. I think you'll get a lot out of it. At least hopefully you do. So that's what we're going to do in this video. So let's buckle down and get to it. Alright, so as you know, we do everything from scratch around here. So you'll see that I've got my blank text document here, and we're just going to go ahead and start coding. So I'm actually going to show you how I code, and at first it's going to seem to kind of go against the things I've talked about before, but then in the end we'll bring it all back and you'll see how I do it, and also explain why I do it this way. So what we're going to do is we're just going to create a page, okay? And so we're just going to kind of lay out the basic elements. So we're going to lay out our HTML tags. We're not going to get too in depth with anything in here. We're going to lay out our head tags and just start getting our basic structure set up here. So in our head, we know we're going to have our, so let's go ahead and do our body. Get that set up. Alright, so in our head, then we know we're going to have our title. And this is the advanced mini site. Title. Alright, and I'm going to put our style sheet right here. Now I know this goes against what I talked about before, but I'm going to show you why I do this. I'm going to explain why they do this here in just a little bit. Alright, so we got that set up. Now I'm just going to come in here to our body and I'm going to set up our basic structure. So we're going to have our header, and then we're going to have our navigation, and then we're going to have a container, and I'll show you why I do that as we go forward here. And again, we're just laying out the basic blocks here, and then inside our container we're going to have our content, and let's get our closing on that. I always like to close them as I do them, otherwise you can start to get confused, especially when you have a bunch of them. And we're going to have a bunch of them. We're going to have content left. And let's see, we're going to have our sidebar. All right, let's see. And then after our content, we're going to have our footer. Okay, so that looks like what we need for our basic structure here. We've got our closed, we've got our body closed, we've got our, got our head closed way down here. That's not going to work. Alright, so we got our style, and we'll close our head there. Okay, so this is kind of the basic structure that we're going to work with. So I'm going to save this, and I'm saving it in I'm using XAMPP, which is a local server I've been messing with lately. I know in one of the earlier videos I said I don't do that much anymore, but I did find this one and have been playing with it, and I like it. So XAMPP, as you can see here, it's XAMPP. If you want to download that and try it, by all means, go for it. All right, so we're gonna go with we're gonna go with home.php. That's what we're gonna save this as. All right, so you'll notice that it kind of makes the coloring all funny, so we just repaste it and it fixes it. Okay, so now we've kind of got our basic structure. So again, just to cover real quick, we've got our title up here. We're going to put our style in here for now. We've got our, again, our opening and closing head, opening HTML. We've got our header. We've got a navigation. We've got a container, and inside that container we have our content div. We have our content left, and we have our sidebar. And then our footer is, our footer is outside of our container, at least it should be. I don't think it is, so I'm going to pull it out here, actually move it down here. So we want our sidebar outside of our container. And that's why it's important to kind of keep things, one thing that you can do to help alleviate some of that is you have your closing for you can start to mark these. So you can say like, this is for content left, right? And now you know that that's for, this is just this won't show up in there in your HTML at all. And you can kind of do the same thing with here. And that way you know what closing div goes with what opening div. So now we know that this is our content div. And then we know that this is our container. So that just kind of helps keep you from getting confused as you go through with all the different divs that you're going to have in there. If you're adding content to it right away, it's not as big of a deal, but that just kind of helps, again, keep you from getting confused. If you have them where they open and close right away, you may not need that, although for the sake of this, we'll just go ahead and do that. That way we can I can set a good example. Obviously, I don't always do this. If I'm building a site for myself, I don't do this because I'm going to be the one that has to muddle through it, and I can figure it out. If I'm building it for somebody else, I'll do this so that they're not getting confused by what I do. Alright, so that's an easy way to keep you from getting confused with all the divs. Alright, so that's our basic kind of structure outline. What I'm going to do next is we're going to start styling it, add different styling elements to it. And we're going to get the basic style, and then we're going to go into Photoshop and we're going to create some images and show you how to kind of take that style to the next level. So we're going to dive in and style this and go from there. Alright, so let's head up here to the top in between these style tags here. Now what I've done here is I put these in the head, and it'll allow us to actually put our style, all our style elements right here in the page. Now I know this goes against what I showed you earlier, but the reason I'm doing this is when I actually create the design, I started out with this way, so it's all in one area and I can focus on the design part of it instead of having my design elements in one page and my HTML on another page and everything spread out all over the place. It's easier just to keep it all in one place. So I keep it all in one place as I design it, and then once I get it all designed and get everything set up the way I want, we can easily just pull out the parts that we need to pull out and put them into the different files like I showed you before, so that from then on it's easy to edit the site. So I always keep a template just like this with everything all together that is a template of the actual site, and then I take and create more pages where I split it all out like we did before. I'll show you as we go, but just to kind of cover that, that's why I do it, because it's easier just to keep it all in one place and keep me focused on the design part and not having 4 or 5 or 6 pages all over the place. Alright, so the first thing that I like to do with the site is I like to get the shape of everything. So With the shape, we're going to come through and just kind of give everything their size, their width, and their height, and everything. So the first element that we have that we come to is our header. So I'm just going to start with our header, and I'm going to give it a width, everything a width of 960 pixels, and I'm going to give this a min height of 150 pixels. Okay, then that way it just has some size. And then I'm going to give it a margin of 0 auto, so that'll center it, as we've talked about before. Okay, so there's that. And then the next one we come to is our navigation, and it's going to be pretty similar here. And we're going to give it a width of 960 pixels. We're not going to worry about the min height right now, and we're giving a margin of 0 auto. Okay, and then we're going to come to, let's see, our container, and our container is going to be the same. One thing that I like to do right off the bat with an element like this, I know it has nested divs, and we talked about nested divs before, where this container doesn't have any actual paragraphs or headings inside of it. The only thing that's inside of it are other divs. And when those divs stretch, this div, since it doesn't have anything in it, won't stretch automatically. So we have to tell it to overflow to auto. That'll tell it to stretch with the other nested divs. So I always like to do that when I know that that's going to be the case right off the bat. Otherwise, you get down the line and your design's kind of messed up and you're like, what? So that helps to just alleviate that right off the bat. All right, same thing, margin 0 auto. All right, then let's see, our content. And we're going to give it, same thing, width of 960 pixels. And we're going to give our content a min height of 400 pixels. And then same thing, margin 0 auto. Again, that just centers it. All right, there's our content. Now we're going to have our content left, and because I've designed this I know that our width needs to be 580 pixels. You're gonna have to play with that a little bit with between the size of your content left area where your main content is and your sidebar and the different padding and margins that you have. You're gonna have to play with the size until you get it right, but it's just as simple as changing this number until everything aligns how you need it to. So we're going to do a float left because we want it to float left so the sidebar can come up alongside it. And I'm going to give it a margin right of 20 pixels. Okay. And then we're going to do our sidebar. And again, I just know what that width happens to be because I've designed this already. But again, you're just going to have to play with it a little bit. Width is 280 pixels. I'm going to float left. Alright. And last but not least, our footer. Okay, so we're going to give our footer a width of 960 pixels. And we're going to margin of 0 and auto to again center it. So what that's essentially going to do is it's going to make everything 960 pixels wide and center it all right down the center of the page. So we have a nice big box right in the center of the page. And if we come back to our site, that's essentially what we have. We have this nice big box in the center of our page. And of course, this back here, this is the actual header right here, and then this is the navigation bar right here. So just again a bunch of different boxes, and so they're all centered right in the center of the page. So that's what that does. Okay, so now that we've got our basic shape all built out, what I like to do now is come back and add in some more of the finer elements like colors and fonts and borders and different things like that, and just add in some of the basic coloring and basic other styling type elements. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to come in here to the body, and I'm going to color the text. And I know again what color I'm using, but you'll want to go you'll again want to go to the hex color picker that I showed you in the earlier videos and use that to find exactly what colors you want. I already know because I've gone and picked them out, but so I'm going to give that a color which is kind of a darker gray, and then I'm going to give the background kind of our yellow color. Alright, so there's that. And then I'm going to do the font. And what I'm doing here is you can start with the font. You don't just have to do font family and size. You can just put font, and then you can put the size that you want the font to be by default, so 14 pixels. And then you can put in the different font types of font that you'd like it to be. So you can kind of just cram it all into one, and it'll work. Okay, so there's that. And then the next big thing that we need to do is the content area. So we're going to give this a background. It's just white, just like that. And so now if we go to our site here, you can see that we have this yellow color that's in the background, and we have this white in front, which we can go, again, I have this saved locally, so we can go to my template here that I had created, and we can see that these two, they're starting to look pretty similar. Okay, so we can kind of see the basic structure already coming together. And so at this point then, what we need to do is we need to come in here and add some content, because a lot of the elements that we need to style from this point on, once you kind of get your basic, we've already got kind of our basic layout here. You can't see the sidebar over here because we're not coloring it, but it is there. And so and our navigation bar is the same way. We don't actually have any navigation items yet, so you can't see that, and our logo and all that jazz. But you can we already have the basic structure down. So now we just need to come in here and add some content, because the specific styling that we're going to do is going to apply to the content that we're adding in here. So I've already got most of the content. In the interest of time, I've already got most of the content written, so that you don't have to sit here and watch me type it. So I'm just going to kind of come through and paste it in. And so the first thing that I'm going to do is just the navigation. And if you'll notice, it's just a basic unordered list. ULLIA, like we talked about before. I didn't actually make any links to anything because we're not going to worry about that yet. So we can come back and fill those in a little bit. But we got the structure of it in there. And then I'm going to come in and I'm going to get the content for our content left here and paste that in there. And then the last big thing is going to be the sidebar. So I'm going to get the sidebar, get the sidebar content here. Alright, we got sidebar, sidebar element, sidebar element, sidebar. Alright, just want to make sure we had all our divs lined up there. And then I'm going to get the footer content. Okay, so that's pretty much all of our content. And again, this is if you're creating a website for somebody else and you don't know what the content would be, you just put in dummy content so you can see what it looks like. If you know what the content is going to be, this is a good time to add it when you have the basic structure kind of filled out, and you can kind of start to see how it comes together. Alright, so if we come back to our site, then you can kind of see we're starting to get a little bit closer to this. Obviously our navigation items aren't exactly right. We got some different things we need to do in here, and we don't have our logo yet. But you can kind of see that we're getting closer to our structure. So the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to come back in here and we're going to style the specific elements and the specific content that we just added. So the first big thing that we're going to style is going to be our navigation bar. So I'm just going to take the actual navigation bar styling that I already have, and I'm going to take it and I'm just going to paste it in here, and then we're going to talk about it. Alright, so we have our navigation, which we created before with the 960, and it's centered. Then we have our unordered list. Okay, we got rid of the margin and the padding and the list style type, so that's going to get rid of all of this over here and bring these right over. Okay, and then we displayed it inline, so they'll actually display in a line. And then we have our, and that's for our ULLI, that's the list item we want to display in line. And then each of the links that we have inside of there, we have a background color, the text decoration none to get rid of the underline. We have our padding that we have here, which again is something you're just going to kind of have to play with. We transform the text to uppercase, and then we put kind of a border around it. So we have a border left of 1 pixel, and this kind of grayish, or it's a brownish color. And then we have border on the top and the border on the right, and then we don't have one on the bottom. And then we have our background color here. So if we go to our site, you can see now that we kind of have something similar to what we have over here. In fact, we have pretty much what that was. And again, it was just if we come back to the code, it was just giving this link the background color, getting rid of the text decoration, getting rid of, you're adding the padding, the uppercase, and the borders, and then the background color. That's all that was. So you can see how dramatically that changed just with that little bit. And then if we go back into our code here, and we go to the next line, then we have what is essentially our hover. Okay, and so again, it's just like we did in the last videos. We changed the color of the text to this color here. We have a border that's now, we changed the border from this kind of brownish color to a white, and then we changed the background color to white. So now when we hover, then we get that white, just like that. So that's, I mean, it's just as simple as that. It's just a matter of changing just a few different elements in here, and it changes the entire thing. So some key things with this, on the UL, you always put on the UL element, that's where you do the margin 0, padding 0, list style type none. That gets rid of all of the bulleting formatting. On the ULLIA, that's where you do the inline, and that's where you can also set your margin. So the margin right 3 pixels, what that creates is this little space right in here. Okay, so if you want some spacing, that's where you would space it out. And then it's where most of your actual styling is done is on the ULLIA. That's where we gave it the background color. That's where we got rid of the underline. That's where we gave it the padding. The padding is all this space around here. Okay, so if I were to come in here, now we're to just delete this padding here, and we go back, it gets rid of all that space. So that padding is how you add that space. Okay, so we add it back in. You can see, if I can get over there, you can see that that's what gives us our space. And now we have our background color, we have our border that we added as well. Okay, so it's really, again, it's just really simple stuff like that that allows us to create those elements. And then again, the hover, we just essentially took pretty much the same elements as far as the border, the background and the text color, and we just change them. So we change them so that now they work with a white background just like that, and it makes it look like it's a part of this other content here. So again, you can see that's getting pretty close to what we have over here. All right, so coming back into the code, then the next thing that we have that we want to look at is our container here. And so what I'm going to do with our container is I'm going to give it a padding of 10 pixels, and I'm going to give it a background of black. Now we're not going to keep it black, we're going to actually create an image that is going to go there, and we're going to do that here once we get to the images. But this is going to allow us to actually see that black so we can see where it's at. So if we come back over to the site here, you can see now we have this kind of this border that is all the way around our our content section here. And if we come over here, you can see this light little border around here as well. That's the image we're going to create, and we're going to use that as our background. But for now, just so we can see it, now you can see that we have our little border around here. Now, what you're going to notice is that we have our links up here, like they don't match up. On here, they come right up to the white here, but on here, there's a gap there. So what we do is we come back into our navigation, and we come to our navigation div here, and we're going to change the positioning on it. So we're going to come in here, and we're going to position relative, and then we're going to do top. We're going to do 4 pixels, and I happen to know that that's what it's going to take because I've already designed this. But again, it's just something that you'll have to play with to get that exactly where it needs to be. So we'll save that. We'll come back over, and you'll notice that now it comes down and lines right up just like we want. So again, it's just something. It may take 5 pixels, it may take 3, but you can use that position relative. And what that position relative does is it tells the browser that you want to position that element, this navigation element, this div, you want to position it relative to its current position. So before, its current position was 4 pixels higher, which made it not line up correctly. So then we tell it position relative, and then we use the top, and it's going to move the top down 4 pixels. Okay, so if you needed it to go up, you would do bottom and do 4 pixels, and that would move those elements up. If you needed it left or right, then you'd use left and right to do that. And so you just play with that until you get it exactly where you want it. And I mean, we could put like 50 in here, right? And we come back, and now they're clear down here. So you can take these elements and pretty much put them wherever you want on your site, and they'll overlap other divs and all that stuff. It doesn't matter. They'll go right over top of them without, you notice it doesn't throw any of the other text off, which is the really nice thing about divs, is that they can overlap without throwing the rest of the content off. So that's how we get our navigation bar here to line up exactly with our content area here to give it that effect. And then once we get this image created here in a minute, then that's gonna make this look just exactly like this over here. All right, so next we have our content area, but our content area is actually set up just about how we want it. So we're just gonna leave that alone. We're gonna come into the content left, and the only thing that I really want to do with this specific element is add a padding. And we're going to do 20 pixels. And again, that's something you can play with. I just, again, happen to know. But you'll notice that our text is right up to the edge here, which doesn't look good. So we take this and we give it a padding of 20 pixels, and that brings it in. Okay, so it keeps it from being right up on the edge over there. And then we need to add an element, which is our content left H1. And that's going to edit this specific element right here. All right, so let's see. we're going to do content left H1, and we're going to give the font size of 24 pixels, a margin top of 0. Okay, so we save that, we head back over, and that just changes the size of this up here, brings it back up just a little bit so it doesn't, there's not quite as big a gap from the edge to here. It just kind of makes it look a little more, to me, a little better, just kind of like this one here. And you can see as we're switching here, there's not much that's changing, so we're getting closer to where we want to be with our design here. All right, so the next thing we have is our sidebar. All right, so our sidebar, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to give it a padding of 20 pixels, and since I've already showed you kind of what that's done, I'm not gonna go back and show you, the same thing that it does. It adds that padding on there. So next thing we're gonna do is we're gonna go into our sidebar element class that I created. All right, so classes real quick. Notice inside our sidebar I have this sidebar element div, and I have 2 of them. Okay, and essentially what these are, they're boxes that I can put around each one of these content, so I can, essentially what I did it for is so I can control the spacing, how much spacing between one element to the next. So this about me section all to here is one sidebar element, all in one div, and this unordered list, all this right here, is in another div. And if we go back to the code, you can see that here. Here's our first sidebar element, and you can see that's the about me section, and here's our second one, and that's our unordered list. So that's why I do that. Now with classes, if you're gonna have 2 or more elements on one page that are gonna have the same style, you can use a class. Okay, so IDs, like our ID container, is only if it shows up once. It's talking about this specific element. So with classes, what it allows you to do is I could create 100 sidebar elements, and they'd all have the exact same style if I give them this class. So it allows you, if you have multiple elements on a page that are going to have the same style, you can just give them a class instead of having to give each one of these its own individual name and style it individually, which just adds to the amount of coding you got to do. So these classes are really helpful in doing that. So that's where we're going to style, is we're going to just style this element here. And so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to give it an overflow auto, and then we're going to give it a margin, because that's pretty much what I created for, was to control the spacing of 15 pixels. Okay, so that's going to increase the amount of space that we have between here. Never underestimate the power of white space in your designs. So you can see we've added quite a bit of white space to this design. And again, never underestimate the power of white space. It can be really powerful for the way your site looks, so keeping it from looking cluttered. All right, so there's our sidebar element. The next thing we have is our sidebar H3, and this is our title that we have for each section. So this part right here, and you'll notice over here we kind of have this blue or blue greenish, whatever color that is, background. So we want to set that up here. So here's what we do. We give it a color of the text is white, and we give it a background color, and I'm just going to paste that color in here. Again, you'll need to use your hex color picker to figure these out, but I already know them. So alright, so 7 pixels, 10 pixels, and we're going to text transform. You can do uppercase, lowercase. There's a couple different things you can do. Camel case, I believe. Text uppercase, and then we're going to change the font size to 14 pixels. Okay, and we'll save that. And we'll come back over here to our site, and you can see that now we have this set up identical to what we have over here as far as our sidebar headings are concerned. All right, so let's keep moving on, and we're going to go to our sidebar unordered list. So sidebar UL, and we're going to give it a margin of 0, padding of 0. Again, that gets rid of all that stuff, and a list for the bullets, and then we're list style type none. Okay, and that's all we're going to do for that. And then we're going to have a sidebar UL LI, and we're just going to play with the margin a little bit. Okay, just to give it again some spacing. So we're going to go 0, 0, 7 pixels, 0. And again, remember it's top right, bottom left. And there's a colon instead of a semicolon, which would throw us off. And if we come back over to the site, you can see now our bullets are gone. We have this item here. You could add in an image here that you would want to put. Maybe you want to have a little piece of paper looking thing or whatever. You could add in an image in there. It would really be as simple as coming down here to here and putting in an image tag like that. Or you could come up and you could go to the ULLIA and you could do a background image, and then you would have to adjust your margin right to the size of the picture so that it would move the text over that far. Okay, so you could do that. We're not going to do that here, but that is something you could do if you want to put that image in there. All right, so that's pretty much everything for our sidebar. Now we're down to our footer, and the first thing I'm going to add in our footer is I'm going to do a text align, because I want everything centered in the footer. If we come back over here and we go here, you'll notice I have everything centered, but here we don't. Okay, so I'm going to go back to our code, and this is going to center it. If we save, now we have everything centered. Okay, all right, so and the next thing again is just going to be our footer elements. I'm just going to paste these in because they're really similar to what we've already done, so I don't think we need to beat a dead horse here. Again, we have our footer unordered list margin. This time I wanted a margin on the top of 15 pixels, because if we come back over here, you notice that there's some spacing here. If I put 0, these links will be right up against here. So you can put like 15 pixels on the top and still put 0 for the rest, and it's going to get rid of the bullets. Same with the padding 0, list style type none, just like we did before. Display inline, margin right, 5 pixels. Again, that spacing is what's in here. You can increase, decrease, whatever you'd like to do. All right, A, footer ULLIA, text transform uppercase, text decoration none. Makes it uppercase, gets rid of the underline. So you'll notice that we don't have an underline. All right, LIA hover, give it the underline back. And then we put for the P, that's all the navigation. Then we put for the P, the paragraph, font weight bold. If we come down, that's paragraph is just the copyright thing. All right, so if we save this and we come back to our site, you can see that now we have these really similar. The only thing that's really different right now is the color of our links. Okay, and also you can see we're getting very, very close to what we have for our setup. So we're getting really, really close. All right, so since we mentioned those links, let's go ahead and come in here and mess with those. So when you want to style all the links across the entire page, you just hit A, just like that, and that'll style them all. And we're going to come in here, we're going to give it a color, and I know the color that I want is 4F. Right, and we close that, and we save it, we come back to our site. Now you can see we have our links the color that we want them. So easy peasy. Right, so now if you look at our site It's eerily close to what we have over here. All we're really missing at this point is our logo, our background image is on hover, our background image here, and our image over here. So essentially what we're missing at this point is our images. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go into Photoshop and I'm going to show you how to create those images. We're going to do all the little elements for the background and all that stuff, and then we're going to finish off with the logo. So I'm also going to show you how to create a logo. So yeah, that's what we're going to do. Let's dive into it. Alright, so here we are in Photoshop. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to open a new file here. And again, you're going to have to mess with the dimensions that you want, but I know that I want 50 by 449. Alright, so I'm going to open that. And that's going to open this little thing here. So what I do is I come in here and I create a layer from the background because I don't really need the background. Okay, and then that'll allow me to style it. So essentially what this background is here, if we come back to here, you can see it's just a gradient. So it's really simple. You come down here to this flash button, depending on what version you're using, but I'm pretty sure all of them have something really similar to this. And you come to gradient overlay, okay, and you can come in here and you can click and you can decide what gradient you want to use, and then you can change the colors. So I know that I want for my top color, my darker color. I know that the hex code is this ECC44A. That kind of gives us that darker yellow. And then over here, I know, and again, you're going to have to look these up on your end. Over here, we're going to go with ECD078. Okay, now that should look familiar because if we come back to our code, our background color is that same color. So when you're doing a gradient like this, essentially you start with a different color on top and fade it into what your background color is, which is exactly, you can't see where the image ends and the actual background begins. Okay, so we save that. I'm going to reverse it because I need the dark on top and hit OK. So that right there is our background image. So what I do is I come back and I go to canvas size and I change the canvas width now once I've got it designed to 1 pixel. Hit OK. And so now it's 1 pixel. That keeps the file size down. And then we're going to come to save for the web, save, and we got to come in here and we got to find our XAMPP folder. XAMPP htdocs, and this is where we're going to create a new folder and call it images, right? And we're going to save this in here, and it's just going to be bg.png. Okay, so that's our first image. Now, how do we get that in our code? Well, we come over here to our code and we come to this background and we leave this in here because we want the background. Essentially what happens is the browser will color the background this color and then it'll lay the image over top of it. And so since our image is only 450 pixels high and our screen here is way higher than that, especially once you start to add a bunch of content and it gets real long, we don't want to use just our image because we'll run out or we'll have to repeat it and it looks funny. So we want to have a background color and then we just type in URL. And in this case, because our image file is located 1 folder up, we can just use images like this and we can do bg.png just like that. Okay, and we're going to do repeat x. Okay, and what repeat x means is that it's going to repeat the image across the x-axis. So across is x and down is y. So we want it to repeat across. And so now if we come back over here to our site, we can see that we have this dark background on the top just like we have with our mini site over here. or with our template over here. Okay, so that's in a nutshell how you take an image and how you add it to or create it in Photoshop and then add it to your site. Of course, we're going to walk through the rest of these, so let's get into some of the other images. Alright, so the next image that we're going to create is our container background. So we're going to come in here, go to new, and we're going to create an image that's 20 by 20 pixels. I'm going to open that. Again, layer from background. And now all we're going to do is this, we're going to leave it white. We're just going to change the opacity over here to 20. Okay, so now this image has opacity of 20. You can see it kind of went light over. And that's all that we're going to do to it. So we're going to take this, save for web, save it as main.png, and then we're going to come into our code in here, and we're essentially going to do the same thing. We're just going to insert, or we're going to put the URL in here instead of this black color. So this time we're not going to have any color as a background because we're just going to use this transparent image that we made. So you're just going to go URL images / main.png, and when you leave it just like this, it's going to repeat both X and Y axis. So you don't have to tell it. By default, an image will repeat X and Y axis. So you don't have to change anything like that. So again, we come here and we save. We come over to our site, and now you can see we have our transparent image back here, just like on our site over here. So now we are incredibly close to being done with our site here. So it looks like we just need to create the background image for the hover for our navigation bar, and then we need to create our logo. So let's go ahead and dive into the navigation bar. Alright, so again, we're going to come in here, we're going to go to File, New. Again, I know that I'm going to leave this about 50. I know I need a height of 34. So I'm going to come in here and create that. And then, again, I'm going to do layer from background. And I'm going to go with a gradient overlay. And I'm going to leave it just like this, but again, I'm going to leave it like that, kind of to the default, but I'm going to change the opacity to 11%, just like that. And then I'm just going to come back here, go to image canvas size, and change this back to 1. And that's going to give me my background for my navigation bar. One thing to keep in mind with this that you want to pay attention to is if you come in here to the gradient overlay, this reverse here, you want to make sure that you have it reversed the right way so the dark side is on top. So we need to have this clicked here. Then once we have that, then we're good to go. We just do save for web, save, nav, save it. We go back into our code and we do the background. We're going to leave it white. Again, the URL. We're going to do repeat X. And then we're just going to do this left top. And essentially what that's going to do is it's going to take the image and it's going to make sure it's right up in the left top corner of this element here, so that it's not hanging down in any way or anything like that. So now if you look, when we hover, we have the same effect that if you come over here and we hover. So that's how we do our hover effect, just like that. So we're pretty much, we're very close to getting what we have for our template here. The next thing we got to do is create the logo, and creating the logo is actually a lot easier than you might think. So let's go ahead and dive into that. So the first thing that I do when I'm creating a logo is I find the image that's going to be associated with it. So not all sites that you create are going to have an image that's associated with it, although some are. And so I'm talking about this image right here. So that's the first thing I do, because it's going to kind of control the color, and it's going to kind of control how the rest of the logo comes together. In fact, if you're doing this, you probably create the logo first. I saved it for last just because it's probably the most difficult of all the stuff we're doing, although it's really not that difficult. But anyway, you probably want to do it first because it's going to dictate a lot of your color scheme as well. So anyway, I get my images from Microsoft Clip Art. So finding this image, I just typed in monkey because I knew what I wanted for my tagline. And you need to come over here and select Clip Art, and you'll notice that this image is the first one here. Now I did go through all of these just to look at them, and I searched a couple other things, but I ended up settling on this one, which is the first one. So again, I'm assuming you know how to download from Microsoft Clip Art. You just check it, it'll come over here, you download it, and when it downloads it, it's going to download it as a Windows meta file. Okay, so a Windows meta file, if you have the Adobe suite, you can actually open them with Adobe Illustrator. I don't have an Illustrator installed on here. I do have it, but I don't ever use it, so I don't have it installed on here. But you can open them in Illustrator and then just simply export it or save it as a PNG or whatever after you do your editing to it. Or you can actually just have Illustrator and Photoshop open and drag it over into Photoshop, whatever. But that's where I get my logos, so they're pretty much already pre-made. So that's all I really did with this logo, is I just got it from Microsoft Office and turned it into a PNG, and then used it in Photoshop and added the rest of this to it. So I'm gonna kind of pick up from there in Photoshop and show you how I made the rest of the logo. Okay, so here's the logo, and I have this saved as a PSD file, so that's why I have it here. So here's the logo, and real quick, I'm just gonna kind of recreate it again. As I said, I have my monkey over here, and it's just a PNG file that I opened and drug into this file. So as you can see, we can move him around, whatever. And then from there, I just come over to the text, and I typed in my website here, my line that I want here. Actually, get rid of the .com. Okay, so then the fonts are what I typically do when I want to pick a font. Is I'll write this out first, just like that, and then I'll come over here, and then I'll literally just go through all the fonts just like this until I find one that I like. And you may find several, but you can kind of narrow it down from there. I know that this one is Impact, so we're just going to use that. And then it's fairly big, so something like that. Let's bring this to the top. Okay, so there's our new the name of our site here. So what you can do, you'll notice that it's a little smaller, but as far as length, what you do is you just select it, and then you come up here to this character, and you have your kerning right here, and you can just extend this out and make it work for you. So I'm going to go with here. And then essentially what I did is to get the color, I double click, come up here to the color, and then I started off with this color. Okay, and then I just kind of moved it around until I got a color that I liked, and I settled on the base color as this. Okay, so I hit OK, and then instead of selecting everything, I just selected this, and I come back in here, and I knew I wanted it darker. So I started coming down here with a darker one until I got something I liked. And I actually went through several different versions before I settled on this final one. but I ended up with this color like this, which for me showed up about how I wanted it to on the site. So again, just something you're gonna have to play with the color. You're gonna have to use a little bit of your own design eye to look at it. But that's essentially how you do it, is just kind of play around with the colors until you get them how you like them. I usually try to have a breakup in the color there so it's not so monotonous. And also it helps to highlight a certain part, like make my website. That's kind of a key element of the marketing for my website, so I kind of wanted to highlight that as well. Alright, so then we hit OK, and then we finished that. And then what I did is I came in here and gave it a stroke, and we're going to go with black, and then I believe it's at 2. Yeah, it was 2. Okay, so that's essentially our logo there. Now the length is a little bit off, probably because this should be 20. But again, it's not a huge deal. You can just kind of play with that. So you can see that that's pretty much identical to what we have there. Okay, so now we got that did. The last thing I did to it was give it a drop shadow. And 120, I pretty much left everything how it was set and just hit OK. So pretty simple. Okay, so we'll get rid of our old one so we can see our new one that we're creating now. Then from there, it's really easy. You just make some more text. So I did .com, and this I did in a Calibri font, just because I wanted it a little more clear. I didn't want it to have it all of the impact because it'd be kind of overkill. And then I just kind of came in here and played with the size until I got the size that I wanted. Probably 24, something like that. Okay, and again, the color, I believe I went with this color here, and I also believe that I made this bold. Okay, so there we have that, and I came over here, and to flip it, I just go to edit, transform, and we want to rotate it counterclockwise. So we did that and brought it up here. Looks like it's has some kerning to it. Probably a little smaller than what I made it to. But anyway, it's not a huge deal. As long as it looks somewhat, that probably even looks better now that I look at it. But add that over there, and then for the tagline, it's pretty much the same thing. And I changed this size. I believe this is like 20 or 22. Maybe it's 20. Yeah, it looks about right. And then I changed it to bold italic. Yeah, that's about the length. So you can see those are pretty close to identical in length. They might have a little bit different kerning on them, but close enough. And then I changed the color on here. So again, I came in here and I played around, blah, 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 and figured out a color and eventually settled on that color. Okay. And that was mostly, I believe, due to get it to show up how I wanted it to on against that yellow background. So you just got to play with that stuff. Okay, so again, we'll move this up, and we'll get rid of our old one so that we can see it. Okay, so those are all the new elements we just created, and it pretty much looks identical to our logo. So we're going to save this, and we're going to come in here, and monkey logo will work. All right, so now we go back to our code, and this isn't going to be in the style sheet. This is actually going to come down here into the header, and you can do a. If you want your logo to be linked to your homepage, then this is how you would do it. Obviously, I don't have it linked to the homepage, but I am linking it. We'll put in the actual links here in a minute. But there's that. And then we do an image source equals, and again, if you're on a web server, you might want to just put in the full absolute path, http www. Whatever. So here I'm not going to worry about it. I'm going to do images, monkey logo .png, and then you always want to give your images an alt. I'm just going to put logo. That's not the best. You probably should put like howtomakemywebsite.com, whatever. But I'm just going to put logo, close it, then close our A tag. Okay, so that is our logo inserted into our page. And if we come back to our site, now you can see that we have our logo here. Now, I specifically left this way because this is a problem that you'll run into. And I remember back in the day, man, like this little border right here was such a pain in the butt to get rid of. It was, for me, it was a problem. So maybe not for you, but for me it was. So I'm going to show you how to get rid of it so that you know. So the easiest way to do it is to come into your code, and we're going to go all the way to the top, and we're going to go right under our A here, and we're going to do image, and we're going to put border none. It's really that simple. It took me a long time to figure out. I'm probably slower than most, whatever. So border none. So then we come back and boom, no border. And now if you look at our site, the only thing that really changes is our logo, and that's because you saw the little bit of pieces, they were off, but of course your logo is going to be consistent because you're not going to make two like I did. So now you can see our site is identical. So I've just showed you how to create this site right here using PHP, CSS, well actually not PHP yet, HTML, CSS, and Photoshop. So it's really not that difficult. And now if we take this, I'm going to close that, and we come in, I'm going to close this as well. We come back, now what we can do, now that we've got everything that like how we want it, then we can simply come back in here and we can start to create our site the way I showed you before. So I'm going to come into our htdocs folder here, and I'm going to create a new folder. I'm going to call it demo. And then what I'm going to do, move that back over here. I'm going to create a new file, and I'm going to come over here. I'm going to grab all my header elements all the way down through the navigation to the container, just like this. I'm going to cut that out of there. I'll come over here, paste it in here, save this as up in our demo, and we're going to save this as header.php. Okay. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new one, and I'm going to take the style, all the style elements, I'm going to pull those out. I'm going to get rid of this. We'll come back to that in a second. And I'm going to paste all my style elements over here. I'm going to save this. We're going to call it style.css. Boom. And then we're going to come back over here and we're going to link to it. Link. It's a style sheet. It's text/CSS. And the actual hyperlink reference is style.css. Self-closing links. Link. Boom. So there's that done. I'll come back over here and let's get the sidebar. So we're going to get the sidebar all the way down right there. Boom. And we're going to come in here. We're going to paste this. I'm going to save this as sidebar.php. Come back over here, grab our footer. That's all the rest of this. Create a new file, paste it, save it. Footer.php. Boom. Alright. Now we're left with our home page. And we're going to save this. We're going to do a PHP include. Header.php. And PHP include. Sidebar.php. And our last but not least, our footer. All right. So now everything should be kosher. So if we come over here and we change this to demo, and actually that's not going to be kosher because I need to take our images file and move it up into this demo file. So now our images are where they're supposed to be. So now we should be kosher, but we'll see. All right, so let's see what's going on here. And of course, it always comes down to something simple. If we come back over here, you notice our home isn't in here. So if we go back to htdocs, we take our home and we drag it up here. Now, we should be kosher. Of course, we got to go to the right. Demo/home.php, and there we go. Okay, so a little finagling, but you get the point. Our code was actually correct. We just needed to move our files around, and so we have this new demo folder, images, all our home and all our other files are in here. So now what we can do is we can come back over here and we got to reopen that home file. We can come back over here, we can copy all this, we can create a new page, and we can just change this to about, and we can change the content in it. And now we have an about page, and we save this as about.php. And then we can do the same thing for another page. Contact us. Contact.php. Make sure I close that. Okay. And then now, here's what's really cool. We can go into our header and our links here. We can do this to home.php, about.php, and contact.php. Same with our footer. Home.php, about.php, and contact.php. We save all that and we come back to our site and we click on the about link and we go to our about page and our contact page and back to our home page, and you can see the style remains the same. So once we got the initial style created, now we can add pages at will in just a matter of minutes, seconds really. All you got to do is come up with the content, and it's easy to put it in there once you've coded it. And you notice that we also changed all our links really quickly. We only edited 2 files, our header and our footer. 2 files, and it changed across all of our pages. So a really credible, powerful way to design sites. I've taken you from a blank text page to showing you exactly how I created my own site. Obviously, there's some more to my site, and it's a WordPress, and it's a WordPress theme, so there's more to it. But you get the basic idea of how to use PHP, CSS, HTML, Photoshop, and images together to create what I think is a really cool site. So I hope that this has been informational for you. This is pretty much the end of the course as far as our core training. So I hope it's been really powerful for you. Obviously, if you have questions, feel free to ask questions. If you need to go back and rewatch some videos, go back and rewatch them. But again, I hope it's been very powerful for you. I hope you've learned a lot, and I hope you feel confident to go out there and create your own site. And what I would strongly suggest to you is that you create a development server, whether it's a local server like what I got here using XAMPP, or you create a website just for testing and you start playing with this stuff and get out there and don't worry about breaking anything. You're not going to break anything that bad, especially messing with just this stuff. This stuff's pretty basic stuff, but again, very powerful. I mean, you see the kind of site that we can create with just a little bit of knowledge. So get out there, get a development server and start practicing this stuff. Start creating websites and just mastering it, and eventually you'll be able to sit down in a matter of a couple hours and create just a kick-ass website or a kick-ass theme, and do things that now you may not imagine were even possible. So that's how to create a website from scratch. I hope you enjoyed it, and hopefully I'll talk to you again soon in the other courses.